Welcome to the annual Fredericton Chamber of Commerce Parliamentary Update with our MP, Jenica Atwin. Thank you so much, Jenica, for participating today and for your engagement with our organization and our members and with other organizations since you've been elected. I'm still calling it our annual, even though sadly, the very first event we had to cancel last year when the pandemic hit was the parliamentary breakfast, and it would have been your first parliamentary breakfast. So we're really pleased to host this event today, even though it's virtual, but I'm very hopeful that next year we can add back the breakfast piece. I'd like to ask everyone as they join us this morning to mute your mics, and I want you to be thinking about questions that you might have for Jenica. She has graciously agreed after she makes her remarks to take questions, and I would ask that you put your questions in the chat, and we'll be working our way through those following her presentation. I'd like to say a special welcome to all of our guests this morning, and in particular, we have two mayors on our call, Mayor Mike and Mayor Wilson Shee, so thank you very much. If I've missed any, I know there are other elected officials, but if I've missed any of our mayors or our provincial elected officials, my apologies. So by way of introduction, Jenica grew up in and around Fredericton and Oromocto, and she graduated twice from UNB with a Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Education. She first ran as a provincial Green candidate in 2018. She doubled the Green vote in New Maryland, Sunbury, and she was elected as federal MP for Fredericton in October 2019, the first woman ever to do so. Speaking of first, she was also the first Green MP elected outside of British Columbia, and we know that there are many more firsts that will come for such a dynamic leader. I also want to thank you personally, Jenica, for you and your team, Robert Shido in particular, for the tremendous and tireless work you've done through the pandemic. You've attended countless meetings, certainly with us. You've heard our concerns. You worked across all levels of government. You've gotten answers to really difficult questions that we've had and our members have had. You've advocated on our behalf, and we really, truly appreciate it. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Fredericton's MP and the 2020 Maclean's Parliamentarian of the Year Rising Star, Jenica Atwin, to deliver her comments, and then we will have our Q&A. So again, I invite people to put questions in the chat, and Jenica, I pass the mic to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to be here today. And of course, it was sad to have it canceled last year, but we'll make do with our technology. So I'd like to thank Bob, Krista, Morgan, the whole Chamber of Commerce team for making this possible this morning, and for everyone for registering and joining us. And we'll have to enjoy that breakfast next year, but I hope everyone has their coffee and something to entertain themselves while I give my remarks for the next few minutes. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land we live, learn, and work on is the unceded territory of the Wolastoq, and what a pleasure it is to span the river valley of the beautiful and bountiful Wolastoq. I boast all the time that we have absolutely the best riding in Canada. I may be biased, but I think it still rings true. As Krista mentioned, I've been your member of parliament since October 2019, meaning I've got almost 17 months under my belt. I'm a little older, a little wiser, and a little grayer. And this work has been the biggest challenge of my life, as well as the biggest honor. And I can't tell you enough how thankful I am to represent the people of Fredericton in the House of Commons. Before being elected, I'd only stopped for a photo outside of Parliament on a summer trip with my family. After being sworn in, I accompanied my family on a tour of those hallowed halls with my name on a seat. With pride, I took another photo with the bust of Agnes MacPhail, Canada's first female MP, because being the first female represented from Fredericton is an honor not lost on me. You have all been a part of this journey, and I hold you and your families in my heart and in my words when I speak in the House of Commons. The most exciting part of my job, of course, is connecting with constituents and talking about the challenges and opportunities that face us right here in Fredericton. Of course, the last year has certainly thrown a wrench into our best laid plans and impacted how we get to connect. I look forward to being with you all in person once again next year. And for now, Zoom is the other hero of the pandemic. And I know many of you are probably feeling zoomed out, but as I mentioned, I am thankful for this technology because in some ways it has been a blessing, and that I've been able to meet with more organizations and more individuals locally and across the country each day than would ever have been possible before. I've had many difficult discussions with constituents in crisis, as well as many uplifting and inspiring conversations that fuel my work and give me the energy I need to deliver. I cannot thank my incredible team enough for their dedication and leadership. We are extremely proud of our case resolution track record, and we look forward to assisting you, your friends, and loved ones at any time should they need us. I want to provide for you all today an update on my work in Parliament. I'd barely gotten my feet under me in the House of Commons last spring when the pandemic shifted the ground underneath us. It's not exaggerating to call the last year in the House of Commons and in communities across this country historic. As provincial and local governments initiated public health lockdowns to protect citizens, the federal government began rolling out massive relief programs in real time to support businesses and workers. I was proud to debate into the wee hours of the morning to ensure Canadians knew we had their backs. Of course, not every program hit the nail on the head in the beginning, but goodwill on behalf of government and the feedback from organizations like the Chamber and its members proved to be invaluable. It was a pleasure to be included on weekly calls with the Chamber and other heavy hitters of provincial, municipal, and economic voices to ensure we were sharing information quickly and effectively. The federal government also operated a call-in Q&A session for MPs daily in those first few months, with a collaborative approach allowing all hands on deck, which in my opinion is the only way to handle a global pandemic. This government relief not only kept people and businesses afloat in those early days of crisis, but it continues to support workers and businesses through tepid economic recovery today. It has also created space for systemic level conversations, like the need for a better social safety net, perhaps in the form of a guaranteed livable income. A year ago, this conversation would not have been seriously considered. We have seen the ways Canadians continue to fall through the cracks, as well as what can happen when we embrace a challenge and set a course for change. We are in an incredible time of transformation, and as the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. As dark and as difficult as these times have been, I'm more optimistic than ever, and I really mean that. Key to this transformation, however, is remembering the lessons we have learned along the way. Virtual Parliament has been a game changer. Political rhetoric aside, virtual Parliament has allowed more accountability, better access, less heckling, which is nice, and easier participation for parliamentarians for whom travel may be difficult. I'm thinking of Northern MPs, older MPs, MPs with disabilities or illness, and MPs with young children at home like myself. In those first few weeks, the House sat with reduced numbers of MPs for safety. And then when hybrid Parliament, when parties still needed to have some in-person presence, I traveled by car to and from Ottawa as much as possible. It was very important for me to be there physically in the House. Although this meant that my family and I had to quarantine for many, many weeks throughout the summer, even while we had, the Atlantic bubble, but it was certainly a sacrifice I was willing to make. Although I was considered an essential worker, having my family with me, as well as the risk of transmission, was not worth foregoing isolation. As case numbers in Ontario and Quebec were on the rise, I took full advantage of virtual sittings and remote voting, and I've been here in Fredericton since the first week of October. Our latest update has enabled us to vote by phone, which has saved precious time for further debate and private members' business. Prior to that update, it would take hours per vote. I truly believe that virtual Parliament has enabled me to better represent the people of this riding every day from here at home. I get to participate in debate on important issues in the morning, stop by a local organization for a tour that afternoon, go buy my groceries here in the community that evening, and spend Saturday morning with my sons in the backyard. This is how politics can look for MPs today. My colleague in the NDP, Laurel Collins, is pregnant. She's talking about what it might mean for her to be able to participate in Parliament from her home in BC in those first few months with her new child. I'm excited about what this can mean for recruiting candidates with a diversity of life experiences that are so important to have at decision-making tables. I think of the reduction in travel, the cost savings for taxpayers, as well as a decrease in carbon emissions. We are in a very interesting time. While we continue to confront COVID-19 and the emerging variants, we continue to work through the government's legislative agenda as tabled in the House of Commons. As you know, I am part of a small but mighty caucus, which means I am critic for literally 1/3 of government files. It's a big job, but it gives me so much opportunity to speak up on the floor of the House of Commons for important issues facing us here in Fredericton. I am the critic for health, and what a year to have had this role. Through briefings with Minister Haiju and Dr. Tam, and in working with colleagues in the House, we have come to better understand the virus and the associated risks. I'm so proud of New Brunswick for our early mobilization and in minimizing negative impacts. My condolences to all who have lost loved ones, and particularly those in long-term care homes where the pandemic has exposed the many ways we have let our elders down. I'm committed to seeing national standards set to ensure a consistency of care across this country and to regain confidence in the sector. Another issue very close to my heart is mental health. I've spoken at length about concerns for access to mental health services and pushed the federal minister to include mental health in Health Canada's mandate and direct funding for service-based community organizations on the ground. I'm a member of an all-party mental health caucus with like-minded individuals who are fighting together beyond party lines to bring change. The tragedies we continue to face in our community are a call to action. I will not back down on this, and it will remain my top priority. Many of my critic files intersect. For example, I am also the critic for justice and human rights, for women and gender equality, and for Indigenous and Northern affairs. One of the moments I am most proud of is seeing an amendment I tabled to Bill C3 passed first at committee stage and then on the floor of the House to ensure upfront consultation with Indigenous leadership in the development for curriculum of sexual assault training for judges. This is a tangible act of reconciliation, validating the experiences of Indigenous women in our justice system. It is also a step in the right direction for addressing systemic abuses for all women and ensuring sensitivity and accountability for victims of sexual assault. Many of the challenges we face today intersect with one another, and the more we talk about systemic racism, toxic masculinity, the eco-pandemic of mental illness, women abandoning the workforce, or climate change, the more seeing these issues as interconnected and overlapping is important. My team and I work hard to apply that intersectional lens and then layer over it that special Fredericton perspective that personalizes it. I am also the critic for official languages, proudly representing Canada's only bilingual province. I am the critic for Veterans Affairs and National Defence. Being born and raised in close proximity to CFB Gagetown, it has always been part of my identity. I am also the critic for East Coast fisheries, as well as youth, diversity, and inclusion. Each one of these files has allowed me to show my skill set and expertise, as well as learn all I can about being a better advocate and representative for our capital city. I have to say that based on the reception I have experienced in Ottawa, people like what Fredericton has to offer. Our unique identity, mixing urban and rural, French and English, military and civilian, Indigenous and newcomers, thrown in with a bit of that maritime humor and humility, resonates with people. I often get little emails and messages after a speech from colleagues in other parties thanking me for a particular point or complimenting me on my style. And it was very validating for me, and I hope for the whole riding when my colleagues across party lines named me their rising star in the Maclean's Parliamentarian of the Year Awards. It was very unexpected, and I'm just so excited to continue that momentum that we've built. We have gotten their attention. As much as that intersectional lens is critical in decision making, successful governance in the coming tumultuous years will continue to require that cross-partisan collaboration, as well as effective communication across all levels of government. I'm very thankful to have Mayor Wilson-Shih and Mayor Mike join us today, as well as Councillor Scammell. The stakes are too high to ignore that we must work together on these important issues. Part of our discussion this morning will be on what the coming year might bring. But let me first just say that if 2020 taught us anything, it's that no one can predict the future. Along with you, I am eagerly awaiting the federal budget. Hopefully, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, our patience will be rewarded. I expect lots of green infrastructure funding, ongoing support for wage subsidies, and support for those who remain unemployed due to COVID. I'm really hoping to see lots of social programming on things like mental health services, support for those facing gender-based violence, support for older Canadians to live at home, reconnecting women with the workforce, and so many other issues that have been exacerbated throughout the pandemic. Our caucus has been pushing for key funding to support initiatives across the riding. I think the content of that budget, in conjunction with the ongoing vaccine rollout, will inform how likely it is we will see an election this year. I know there's lots of speculation, and some of you probably have strong opinions about when you think there will be one. And I wish I could shed more light on that question, but I'm not one to get distracted by that speculation either. There's still a lot of work to do, and we must remain focused. So for today, I will focus on what we do now. Spring is right around the corner, and pharmacists across the province are gearing up for a massive vaccine rollout. The hope of vaccines will significantly change the landscape over the next year for our communities. As the ground shifts once again, Government programs will need to shift accordingly, and I'm here to continue bringing your voice to Ottawa as those changes impact real people. I've been very pleased with the provincial government's handling of the pandemic and now with their vaccine rollout strategy. I look forward to continuing work with provincial and municipal colleagues to best support the people of this riding. And just so you can't accuse me of painting too rosy of a picture, let me just say this. There remain some very serious gaps and challenges in federal government systems that haven't accommodated the reality of the pandemic fully. I think of our immigration system, which has been hamstrung for a year now. Those from countries requiring travel visas were not able to reunite with their loved ones. Those who had received confirmations of permanent residency after March 18th of last year have not been allowed to enter Canada. The temporary foreign worker program has struggled. The processing of refugees has stalled. There is so much work to be done. I can't reiterate that enough. In the business world, some of what I'm hearing includes workforce issues related to keeping staffing numbers during the pandemic and in our recovery. Some initiatives placed the onus on employers and made it difficult to manage depending on the size of the business. When a worker can't show up for a small business, it disproportionately affects them. I want to find ways to help small businesses work through this and know that I'm there behind you. I also know that mental and physical health are serious challenges for business owners as well during this pandemic, but there's also an incredible resiliency and innovation that we're seeing. Businesses are changing to reflect the new world. For example, some local tattoo parlors are switching to more home-based solutions with individual owners. Craft breweries have shifted to pickup and delivery options. New Brunswickers have shown amazing support for local shopping and dining, and my hope is that some of these changes will remain permanent, allowing growth we never expected. We will continue to be here beside you as these changes continue to, to reveal themselves to us. So we've had several town halls as ways to connect with individuals across this riding, in person before the pandemic hit, which was really nice, and then virtually over the last year. Some have been issue specific, some have been regionally oriented, and others have been entirely open sessions. We learned early in the pandemic that people needed more from us in the riding than we had initially thought. We shifted gears to hire more constituency assistants, and we now have an incredible team tackling issues raised by constituents day by day. My constit coordinator, Robert, will put my phone number and email address in the chat as well. And as I mentioned before, if you need anything at all from me or my team, please do not hesitate to reach out. We launched my MP website as well, jenicafredericton.ca. There are links to my social media, press releases, video of speeches in the House, copies of letters to ministers, and really a good cross-section of what myself and my team have produced on your behalf. We were also able to take our time to get settled into our new office location, which we love at 154 Main Street here on the north side. And we've been welcomed into the neighborhood with open arms. And as soon as restrictions allow, we will invite you all to an open house so you can see it for yourself. And I very much look forward to that day. There's lots of things I could continue to cover, but I think this is a great time to perhaps shift into questions from our guests and colleagues. And I very much look forward to our conversation this morning. So just thank you once again. And it's just the honor of my lifetime to be your member of Parliament. And I look forward to the work ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments this morning and for this overview of the work that you are doing and that Parliament is doing. The first question I have is, what do you expect to see in terms of continuity of federal programs that are supporting business in the coming months?
Well, so we're hoping for an extension of the wage subsidy program, which is part of it. We also know that there are individuals who still have not been able to go back to work. So we're still looking for the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit to be readapted to the new challenges. There's also something across the country that we haven't yet faced fully, which is the COVID long haulers. There are individuals who have had the virus and have been unable to return back to their normal routines, and that really needs to be addressed. So that's part of it. But there's so much more I think that we need to look moving forward. So I talked about things like the guaranteed livable income, pieces that hold that social safety net together. So some of that remains to be seen, and we're working through it now, but there is a government bill before the House on a basic income pilot. So these are exciting changes, but your voice and everything that we've brought together, these anecdotes, really specific cases from businesses, has very much informed the changes that we've seen to these programs. So please continue to bring that information our way, and we direct it to the proper ministerial departments, and they've been listening. So those changes have been reflected. So some of it remains to be seen, but as I mentioned, I'm very optimistic that we'll be meeting the needs of Canadians, even the ones that have thus far been left behind.
A question from the chat. For some small businesses and NGOs, not-for-profits, the rent relief program of the early months of the pandemic did not go well. Some landlords did not or were not able to take advantage of the rent relief program, and that means that those benefits were not passed to their tenants. The fall program, which was launched, has been very helpful, but is there consideration being given to how to assist those who were not aided by the program from March to August?
Well, we hit a few walls, trying to push for better supports in the rent relief, and part of the issue was that there wasn't directly towards the tenants. That was a lot was up to the discretion of landlords, and we know that they're business owners as well, and they're up against it, and they also have their own bills to pay. So there's a bit of a contention piece there. So there's nothing concrete that I could say around that. Just to know that we are pushing for it to continue and for people to have better access and again, for it to be direct, to not necessarily have to go through, a tenant being the person to make that decision on their behalf. So there's more work to be done there. And just that makes me think of affordable housing in general. That has to be, again, all hands on deck. All levels of government need to make that a priority, because we've seen just how precarious, housing can be. We've seen our homeless situation here in the city grow. So these are very much, questions that we make as a priority and we bring forward with us. So there's conversations happening internally, but I wouldn't say there's anything, specific right now that we've been given as far as a green light to continue these programs or to make sure that those people were reached that, missed the boat last time.
Another question in the chat. This person says they were interested to hear you have a Master's of Education, and they'd love to hear your views on the importance of STEM education and its importance for New Brunswick and for Canada.
Great, yes. So I'm very proud of my background in education, and it's what led me, into the world of politics, which is a bit of an unconventional path to take. But it's because of that cross section of our society that makes me so excited. And I think STEM is absolutely, we've seen so much more emphasis placed on it in the last few years, but more so now than ever, it's got to be our priority, including the arts. So I like the STEAM acronym as well. Especially for young women. I was able to attend a few conferences, really encouraging women to get involved in STEM learning and aspiring. These are the people who are going to solve some of these problems that we have facing our communities today. And so, anytime I get to speak with children and youth, I like to push forward initiatives like this. I get an in-person discussion with youth at Nassau Middle School today. So I'm so excited. And so this is exactly some of the things we'll be discussing. What are their dreams? What are their goals? And hopefully it's, in the STEM, sector, because we need more students involved in science, technology, and it's just exciting to see, what the youth can bring. And it's refreshing for me. And I know that, as I said, they are our future leaders, but they're also the leaders of today. And so, yeah, very, very important for me. I see Science East is here, which is really wonderful, and they do such great work in our city. I've been so thankful to have that a part of my life as well. So certainly a priority for me.
Well, interestingly enough, that question was from Science East, so there you go. We've also got a question here. They're curious about the National Pharmacare program and where is that idea on the government's mandate?
Well, we had a non-government bill not pass in the House around the kind of initiating the first steps towards Pharmacare. And so our government colleagues, they voted it down, but with the kind of caveat that they were working on this, that they're having those conversations with provinces right now. So that's exciting, that's hopeful, although it's a little bit slower than I had hoped. It was a major campaign issue to have Pharmacare. I think we realize now more than ever that this is, part of that health system is that last missing piece that we need to have to ensure that everyone can afford their medications. I'm actually on an all-party mental health caucus as well, but also diabetes caucus and an ALS caucus. And so many of their priorities are around a national pharmacare system. So this has to be, something that we see not in 5 years from now, but I would really love to see this included in our budget, at least the initial pieces. We've got to get this rolling. So as I said, having the NDP bill not voted and supported in the House was a little bit disappointing, but we are assured that within the government that they're having these important conversations and laying that groundwork. So it remains to be seen when this will happen, but just know I'm a cheerleader for Pharmacare. If you'd like to see some of my comments that I've made in the House around this important issue, we're working all we can across party lines again to ensure that this is something that we see in the near future and not far down the line, because no one should have to worry about, paying for their medications.
There's a question in the chat about immigration. This person says, immigration, as you mentioned, leaves a lot to be desired. This person says they're personally impacted, but also wondering what's being done to ensure that we have the infrastructure needed to keep people here, to retain them and not leave them wanting once they land in the province.
That's always our biggest issue, is that retention piece. We want people to come here, to join our communities, to raise their families here, to encourage more of their family members to come and join us. And there's been a few issues around this. Some of the news out of, Dune Street, as an example, is kind of a poignant, circumstance of racism, or just some of the ways that we're not as welcoming as we should be. So there's an education piece there. I think in our communities, we need to work harder. But it's also just about some of the realities that people are going to face when they get here. I think sometimes we focus too much on, bringing people in and encouraging and recruiting, and not necessarily, looking at the credentials and whether or not they'll be able to use that here in Canada, if they'll be recognized, their skill sets. That can be very difficult, and it creates a lot of anguish for families who have come here with the hope of being able to add their skills to our economy, and then have to kind of start from scratch. So that's a piece for sure. Language acquisition is another one. Sometimes the pieces aren't in place for someone to be able to learn their level of English required to really participate again fully in the job market here. There's so much going on, I think. And so, immigration, as I said, it's an issue because of COVID. It's very much been stalled. I think of healthcare as well. A lot of people have come here with the hope that they're going to have access to primary healthcare, and they join the list of thousands of New Brunswickers who don't have a doctor. So there's a lot of issues to this, but I know there's also a lot of amazing people who are really taking a close look at this and trying to do their best to find all the ways that we can improve these situations. So it takes all of us, we're all part of this community, to ensure that any newcomers come and feel welcome and do feel part of that fabric that we have. MCAP does incredible work as well. I remember my first meeting with them. I was blown away. It was hours of things that they were able to provide for programs, and really focusing on that retention piece. But we still lose about 50% to the larger city centers. So we've got to work on this, and I'm very much committed. Again, it's not my critic file, but it's something that we focus on because it's something that's so important to Fredericton. That refugee piece as well is important. We had so many Syrian families come and join us, and there'll be new waves of refugees as climate change impacts, the way people have to move around. Also, there's modern warfare that still continues to happen. So we've got to be open, and we've got to be prepared to take on these new challenges, but we need the resources in place to be able to do that. So I will say that Minister Mendocino has been incredible. He's been extremely responsive. We've sent many letters. He's been able to help us, with family reunification pieces. He's been able to look at different policies and see where we might be able to make changes. So we're working on it. There's lots of moving pieces there, but I really do think it's going to take all of us to make the changes that we need.
Our chamber has been very involved with the immigration strategy for Fredericton as one of the three groups, along with the city. There's the chamber, Ignite Fredericton, and MCAP, and we too are concerned about the retention issue. As a follow-up question with that, because of COVID, many applications for permanent residency were stalled. What's the plan to get these applications processed?
So we've been pushing since day one, especially for those, that they might have missed the cutoff date by days. And really all they need to do is touch down here in Canada and they're a permanent resident. And so there's a lot of people who are in limbo right now. Sadly, it's happening across the country, obviously, but we do know that things are starting to move. We've seen, through our casework that more things, we've gotten more callbacks lately. We've got some more files that are beginning to be resolved. So it's starting to happen. There was just obviously a large backlog that needed to be addressed. So I think for anyone who needs more information on that, please contact our office and we can let you know how the status of certain applications or where we've been able to move the dial a bit. But we're hopeful that, as I said, things are starting to move. The glue is kind of coming out of the system now.
Got a question here that says, you've mentioned a lot of great new programs, but how will we pay for all these new programs?
Well, that's a wonderful question. And as I said, we're very eagerly awaiting the budget. This is the longest time in Canadian history that we've gone without seeing the numbers, any of that kind of accountability for the spending. And I mean, in a crisis time, I don't think it is the time for austerity, but we have to be concerned about what we're passing on to the next generation as far as debt. So there's lots of ways I think as well that we could kind of recoup some of these costs. I'm talking about some of those social safety net programs. When we look at it, maybe a guaranteed livable income or even Pharmacare, there's going to be a high price tag to that. If you ask me, it's more of a political discussion as far as perhaps we rein in tax havens. We look at recouping some of those tax dollars that we should have in the system anyways. We look at some of the ways we subsidize certain corporations and companies. We look at some of the waste that we've been given to certain departments. Some better decision making, I think, can be made on behalf of our ministers. But again, in the position that I'm in, it's easy to kind of point fingers and say how I would do things better. But I do believe that in our existing system, without having to raise taxes, that we can afford these pieces. And really, based on the PBO, budget evaluations and analysis, that we can actually recoup money. This could save us money. So it's really neat to see that in projection. So I think we have to be optimistic, but also very aware, that this spending is important to be accountable for. And again, very much looking forward to the budget. We had hoped it would be in March, but it's looking more like April now.
So we have a question with regards to mental health, and it says, what role could not-for-profit organizations like perhaps the Chalmers Foundation play in improving mental health services or programs in our community and in our province? Government resources pay for staff and operations, but there's never enough.
It's never enough. I think that's really the takeaway. And not-for-profits can play a massive role. I think really that's where we need to direct most of our energy and priorities, because they do that on the ground work. We think about the recent tragedy in our community. Going to the deck in an emergency situation may not be the best option. We need walk-in clinics that are, have professionals on the ground who are ready to deal with someone in crisis in that moment. I know there's an amazing pilot that we're hoping to get funded, and it's about rapid access. And we know that oftentimes individuals only need a single session, to really just find the resources, find the language that they need, building some of those coping mechanisms. So it doesn't have to be expensive, I think is the first thing. It just has to be strategic. And so that's what I'm really looking for from all levels of government. Again, we all have a role to play there. We need some national standards, but really it's about direct funding organizations on the ground. And as I said, that's what I've been pushing for in the All-Party Mental Health Caucus. We've done some research, through the Parliamentary Library. It's possible. It's been done in other sectors. So I think it's just that we need to be bold. I think that, the time to make these changes was yesterday. And so I will continue to push. As I said, this is my number one priority, but absolutely those not-for-profits, those organizations on the ground, they are the answer. I think our healthcare system is already taxed. They've already got, so much burden on their shoulders, thinking COVID aside. But I think that, we need to separate, so that you're not going into the emergency room with everyone else who may have, a bleeding wound or what have you, that you can go somewhere directly to receive the services that you require and speak to someone immediately for counseling services or therapy services. There's a whole multitude of ways we can approach this, but it absolutely begins with supporting those not-for-profits.
You referred to the healthcare system and the challenges there. Our healthcare system has been overworked, and coming out of the pandemic, we're going to have huge wait times for all services. How do we help the system cut the wait times?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is recruiting and incentivizing. We're losing a lot of our nurses to Nova Scotia, to Maine, because there's signing bonuses, there's extra protections, there's union support. So we're missing the mark a little bit here in New Brunswick. And through the work of the nurses union, as an example, they've done an incredible job at really pointing out what the problems are. We just need to listen to them. The experts have the answers. I've spoken to many physicians as well, and they have the solutions. Again, it's about being very strategic. It's about using the resources we have in a better way. So healthcare has been a problem for a lot longer than COVID, but it certainly has revealed even more the ways that we have challenges and barriers, and the ways that we need to do better. And I again, shout out to all of our nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals. They do the best that they can, but the system needs to change. And so, I look to my provincial colleagues to do that. I've had, the great pleasure of meeting with Minister Shepherd in her new role many times to discuss some of these concerns. But I really do feel it comes back to that, recruiting, incentivizing, letting them know how much we appreciate them. I think that's part of it as well. But again, listening to the experts, they know what needs to change. I think it's less about what politicians think and more about what the medical experts really believe is what's necessary.
One of the top 5 priorities that our members voted on this year was access to primary care. So indeed, recruitment is a big issue in this region. And although it's provincial in nature, certainly federal levers are in place to help with those problems. Another question in the chat, you mentioned the homelessness issue. How can you, as our federal representative, work with all levels of government to provide a solution, as well as access to the services, and perhaps we're talking about mental health and addiction services and other, that these folks really need?
That's a great question. So the Rapid Housing Initiative funding that came from Minister Hussein was incredible, but we also know it was majorly oversubscribed. I think the issue is broader than anyone could ever have imagined. So part of it is pushing for more investment. I'd love to see that program doubled. The City Motel project here is kind of up in the air. We want to know if we've received the funding. March 31st is the deadline, fingers crossed for everyone, but it's just because there was so much need across our province, but across the country. So more investment needs to go there. So it's pushing my federal colleagues on understanding the urgency, understanding the high needs. That's a big piece of it, because we know that municipalities, provinces need the resources to address this issue. So that's a big piece of it. Also including voices of those with lived experience. And that's something we've been trying to do from our office's perspective, and to add that into conversations that are happening in municipal council. And there's, again, is also highlighting the work that is going on. There are so many great things, so many great individuals who are really, involved with that strategic piece that I'm talking about, because we know it has to be a wraparound approach. Dr. Sarah Davidson, I can't say enough good things about her. She is a gift to our city. I'm so thankful. I was able to tour, the Riverstone Recovery Center as well. So we're getting there. I think that the growth is happening, but again, we needed these services yesterday. So the urgency piece is really there. But I think now everyone has kind of come around to that, and we are working together at all levels of government. So again, really happy to see the investments made by the province in some of these initiatives. So just continue that work, continue that momentum, but more investment on the federal side. We need more money coming in. That's a big piece of it. And again, on the doctor's piece on mental health, on addictions, is increasing our federal health transfer. And that's something we've been pushing for a long time. I know our block members in the House, that's one of their main initiatives. So I've been able to support them in those efforts. So it's a multifaceted approach, because we do need those wraparound services. But as I said, some of that work is underway, and I'm very proud of the way that our city and our province has been handling it.
So we've had a lot of questions about health, mental health, homelessness, and a lot of social challenges. I'm going to turn to a question back to the business lens. Multiple governments have attempted to launch effective innovation policies, but Canada continues to perform poorly. What do you think needs to be done differently for Canada to be a real innovation leader?
That's an excellent question. Again, I think it's elevating the voices of the experts, of people who are really, this is what they've dedicated their lives to, is looking into innovation pieces. I think of some of the early excitement around things like cybersecurity in the Fredericton area, and the hope is still there. We've had some challenges because of COVID, but those are some things I really like to see grow, because especially as we've digitized our lives, everything's online. We know we need cybersecurity as one of those critical pieces. So that's part of it. We also talked about STEM with youth. We talked about ways that our education system can kind of support this growth and innovation. So that's another piece of it. And again, it always comes back to investment. We need to put a lot into our research sectors. I know there's a lot more discussion around that at the federal level. So it's happening, but we need stronger voices. We haven't heard a lot from our innovation minister, but it's because, again, there's been a lot of focus on COVID and health. So I think as we go through the recovery, we're going to realize just how important it is to adapt and transform and be sure that we're ready for whatever else life has to throw at us. So I think people are ready. And we've seen innovation right here in our own province. Some of the amazing businesses, the way that they've shifted, I think of Lumen Ultra and what they were able to deliver. So it's just so exciting. And I think if we continue that, we're going to see Canada start to reach those levels that we were once at before. So there's opportunity. And I think that's the best thing to look forward to.
Speaking of Lumen Ultra, recently there was a video posted by the Fredericton Airport that featured Pat Whalen from Lumen Ultra talking about the importance of travel and the importance of air access and the importance of our Fredericton Airport. And I did have a chance to take a tour of the airport, the newly renovated airport, and my goodness, it's beautiful and it's going to be so functional when we are able to travel again. So that leads me to the question, when do you think travel recovery will begin in Canada and here in New Brunswick?
Well, as I mentioned, with the hope of vaccines, it's on the horizon. And we know, even though tourism, travel was the most affected sectors, they're going to be the ones to see the biggest boom, because people are so eager to get back to their regular routines, booking those vacation flights, returning to business travel. It's all going to be so crucial to that recovery. And as I said, people are ready. They're just chomping at the bit to get back on those flights, and certainly to be welcomed into our beautiful Fredericton Airport. I was blown away by the renovations. It's stunning. We've kind of entered into the new age now. So it's really nice to see that. And as I said, it's going to happen. We just have to kind of hold on. April, we know, is a time to reevaluate. We've been given that as kind of a milestone date for Air Canada, for others involved in the air sector, to really look at what's to come, what's next. We're going to see, borders opening up, as well as the United States is becoming vaccinated at quite a high rate compared to Canada. So it's going to be there. There's no simple answers right now. There's been so much uncertainty. I see Joanne is here with us as well, and I've just been doing all we can to be there as a support. But it's been a challenge for sure. But I just kind of hold on to, like I said, that this is going to be the biggest boom when things go back to normal, and we'll see those flights booked up solid, as soon as they can.
The next question is an opportunity for you to share with us something that's important to you. The question is there a specific file or bill that you're personally looking forward to advocating for this year that you think we should know more about?
That's a great question. So there's been a lot of difficult bills, that we've gone through. Recently was, Bill C7 on medical assistance in dying was quite a learning experience for me. We studied that bill for over a year. It was passed in the Senate, so now we're moving on. And what we're looking at now, there's a big one around C15, which is UNDRIP. So that's enshrining the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples into domestic Canadian law. There's a lot of conversation right now because it's not perfect in its form. There's a lot of questions about what this looks like, what it looks like for us as non-Indigenous Canadians, what it looks like for Indigenous communities themselves. So I'm very, eager to get involved in the debate around this bill in particular. It's obviously part of my passions. I have Indigenous children. I worked with Indigenous communities for 10 years before this time. So this bill could have major implications for all of us. It could be an incredible tool in the toolkit for understanding that nation-to-nation relationship and what our responsibilities are as signatories, to the treaties. We're all treaty people. So we look to what may have happened here on the East Coast with the Mi'kmaq livelihood fishery and all of the dispute that came out of that. And we're hoping that a bill like UNDRIP could perhaps shed more light on issues of sovereignty, on issues of land title. So that for me is a kind of a personal interest, and I'm very much looking forward to being involved in the debate around that one.
The next question is coming from one of our New Maryland counselors. It says, in New Maryland, we were fortunate to be the benefactor of a recent large infrastructure funding announcement, allowing us to develop a new municipal well field. The funding of the project will have a tremendous impact on our community, and we thank you for your support in this effort. Can you speak to the challenges you face in supporting or advancing projects like this in the riding, and how we might be able to support you in such efforts in the future?
That's an excellent question. Thanks, Alex. I was so happy to see that the funding came through for that project. We know it's critical for the growth of New Maryland, which is one of our amazing suburban communities that are, just really growing in a piece of the puzzle for Fredericton. And so there's other, major projects that we're hoping to have funded. I'm thinking of the Playhouse. I'm thinking of the Fredericton Pool. So there's lots of ways to continue to push for these. So letters of support are always important. There's, I've been building those relationships with ministers and ensuring that they know just how important these are to our continued growth and success. Pre-budget submissions, it's been part of, for the last 2 years, I've been really pushing for infrastructure development or, support for arts and culture here in our area. But I do have to mention, I've been so pleased to see many of the investments that we have had. So, the Wellfield project is an example of that, but we've also had, Maliseet Nation Conservation Council received a large bit of funding, UNB Summer Institute, Wolastoqey Nation Guardians Program, JEDI, the Association of Nurses and then Dementia Project, Giganu Transition House, St. Mary's Band Council, UNB has received lots of wonderful funding opportunities. So we're getting there. I think that sometimes there's a fear that, I'm a Green member of Parliament. We're in a blue province with a red government, that it might be difficult, but I really feel that we kind of work through those things, and I have more faith in our government that they're really just basing these projects on merit. There's a scoring system in place. Of course, there's always a little bit of politics at play, but I hope to avoid most of that, because I just think that that they really are, they're noticing the amazing things that are happening, and they know that it's critical for our growth to receive that funding across the country. So as I said, I've been very pleasantly surprised, perhaps, to see some of the ways that these projects have been funded, and continue to push for the things that we can still need to see. That City Motel project is another one that I'd really love to see funded. So yeah, thanks, Alex, for that question. I think that, again, it's just being open with communication, working together at all levels of government, and just knowing that I'm behind you and I'm a loud voice in Ottawa, pushing just as hard as you'd hope that I would be for these incredible projects.
You've mentioned 3 specific projects that you are advocating for, and that would be the Playhouse. I think you mentioned the pool, and you've mentioned the City Motel. When you're in opposition, how can you best advance those, and what do you do in terms of relationships with provincial and municipal to ensure that which priorities are the top of the list?
So early stages, it's definitely about information sharing. So I try to let organizations know, levels of government know immediately as soon as there's an opportunity for funding, or as soon as proposal grants are open. So that's a good piece. We have to obviously follow the protocols to ensure that there's fairness across the country. So that's part of it. But also, I've been really happy to see the way that ministers have been open to having conversations with me and my teams. Minister Freeland, she's wonderful. It's, again, first woman finance minister, something to celebrate in Canada. So she's been, again, very open to very accessible. We've been able to call her. We've been able to send her letters, submissions. So we push for these things at all channels. When we were in the house physically, it was a little easier to kind of go over and tap someone on the shoulder and just say, hey, is there any status update on this project? Or what can you tell me about this? Or just so you know, I'm really hoping to see some information come about this project. So there's kind of the behind the scenes aspect. And I'm thankful that I've been able to do that. So that's part of it as well, but it's just about looking for every opportunity that I can for that open communication, and just for them to know how important these projects are. So it's really about the selling. I've never been a good salesperson, but I've been, brushing up on my skills, because I know that that's an important piece. And of course, working collaboratively with provincial and municipal governments as well. I'm just thankful for their partnerships.
What do you see as the biggest opportunities for Fredericton area?
Well, I mean, a big one obviously is that immigration piece. We were so fortunate to be part of that big wave of welcoming so many newcomers in previous years, and I want to see that continue. So that has to be maintained as a major priority for us. We need to add more people to join our workforce, to join our economy, and to support, obviously taxes moving forward. So that's a big piece. I also think it's also growing partnerships with Indigenous communities, with Black-owned businesses. There's lots of ways that we can really embrace our diversity and have that be our strength. Fredericton is a beautiful microcosm of all the great things about Canada, and I think that that's something that we need to really just ramp up even more and celebrate even more, and that's going to lead to better growth. So I think that's our opportunity, is capitalizing on the diversity that we have and using that as our strength.
We don't have any more questions in the chat, but I have a question for you. If you were going to predict the date of the election or when it will happen, what's your prediction?
Well, so early on in the year, it really felt like an April election, that it was going to kind of come really quick and just be a short rip period, and we would be at the polls again, which nobody wants to do. It's expensive. We're in a pandemic. Kind of that self-promotion piece is not something I'm looking forward to at all. So I'm glad to see that has kind of faded a little bit. We've heard rumblings about June, that even the Liberal Party federally has been told to prepare. So you're seeing lots of nominations happening across the country for many of the different parties just to be ready. But if I would venture a guess, I would say October. I think it will be a fall election. I think they want to make sure everyone is vaccinated, at least with that one shot. So we have that hope and optimism piece. I think that's what their strategy would really be. So we're more looking towards a fall election, if I could give my best guess.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We have a municipal election coming up in May. So, from the chamber perspective, it's nice to spread them out a little bit. I want to say thank you, Jenica, for your time today, and I'm going to pass the microphone to our chamber president, Bob Chisholm, to say a few words of thanks.
Well, Jenica, I can't imagine how challenging your first term would be, but you've also picked the most challenging time since World War II to be a member of Parliament. I really applaud your enthusiasm. I like your comment about let's not focus on political colors. Let's focus on the problem and the solution. I hope you can spread that word in Ottawa, because I think that's one of our biggest challenges is we don't often work as a complete team. But you've done a great job, and I really appreciate your update. I appreciate your honesty about everything. And I think you've made some amazing accomplishments in a very short time. We appreciate you have a very busy schedule. I think the one thing the media never does when they criticize politicians, they never talk about how many hours all the politicians work from municipal through to federal and what sacrifices their families have to make. I know a little bit about politics, and I am absolutely amazed at the schedules that you, provincial and municipal people keep. My hat's off to that. I couldn't do half of that. But to show our appreciation, the Chamber will make a donation in your name to our Chamber Scholarship. We have some amazing young people every year who apply for this, and we are so happy to do that.
Oh, wow.
I'd also like to thank all the people who attended today, encourage them to stay on our email list and our website to see future events. And like everybody, I really hope the next time we have this, we're in a room somewhere and enjoying each other's company. But thank you very much, Jenica. And thank you, Krista and Morgan and Wendy and Christine, who work hard at our chamber every day during this pandemic to keep us all informed. So have a good, safe day.
Oh, thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate that. And there are long days, but I tell you, they go by fast. So that must mean I'm in the right place.
Thanks, everybody, for attending today. We have recorded this session, and we will be sharing that with the members who were not able to attend today. And Jenica, thanks again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.